Alex Cooper has finally responded to allegations surrounding her company, and what she's not saying is more revealing than what she is. Just days ago, Vanity Fair dropped a bombshell investigation with over 40 sources going on record about the toxic workplace culture at Unwell Network. The internet exploded. Industry insiders are calling this a reckoning moment for female-led media brands that preach empowerment but allegedly practice something entirely different behind closed doors. Multiple employees, mostly young women in their 20s, have come forward with eerily similar stories about Matt Kaplan, Alex's business partner and co-founder of Unwell Network. We're talking about allegations of intimidation, inappropriate comments about appearance, invasive personal questions, and career-ending threats. But here's what's fascinating. When Alex finally addressed this publicly at Cannes Lions, she didn't talk about any of that. Instead, she told everyone not to believe what they read on the internet and suggested this was all a smear campaign.
Whether it's a smear campaign being created for someone's narrative, whatever it be, I think when you read lies about yourself to fuel something else that is an obvious situation going on.
Why didn't she address the actual allegations? Welcome to Behind the Tea, where we break down the real stories behind the headlines. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. To understand why this matters, you need to know what Alex Cooper built. Call Her Daddy became a cultural phenomenon, a podcast empire that redefined how young women talk about relationships, intimacy, and power dynamics. She secured one of the biggest podcast deals in history with Spotify, reportedly worth $60 million. Her brand became synonymous with female empowerment and creating a safe space for women's voices. That's not just marketing speak, that was the entire foundation of her appeal. She positioned herself as someone who understood what young women were going through, someone who would amplify their stories and protect their interests. And then came Unwell Network, launched as an expansion of that empire. Alex brought in Matt Kaplan as co-founder and business partner. Kaplan wasn't just some random hire, he became integral to the business operations, deeply embedded in how the company functioned day to day. The network was supposed to be an extension of everything Call Her Daddy represented, empowering female creators, giving women opportunities in media, building a company culture that reflected the values Alex preached on her podcast every week. But here's where the contradiction begins to form. You're building a brand on empowerment, while your business partner is allegedly creating the exact opposite environment for the young women who work there. How does that happen? How does someone who talks about protecting women's voices every single week not notice or not care about what's happening in her own company? The stakes here are massive. We're not just talking about one bad article or a few disgruntled employees complaining online. Alex Cooper's entire brand, her credibility, her business deals, everything she's built over the past few years is now under scrutiny. When you position yourself as a champion for women and then allegations emerge that your company allegedly mistreated young female employees, that's not a minor PR problem you can spin away. That's a fundamental contradiction that threatens the core of what you've built, and what makes this even more complicated is that these allegations aren't even primarily about Alex herself. They're about Matt Kaplan, her business partner. But when you're the face of the company, when your name is on everything, when you've built an entire empire on the idea that you protect and empower women, his behavior becomes your responsibility. That's the reality of being a leader. Let's get into what Vanity Fair actually uncovered, because the scope of this investigation is staggering. And they spoke with over 40 sources. Think about that number. 40 people willing to go on record or provide information about what was allegedly happening inside Unwell Network. More than 30 of those sources were current or former employees, and here's the demographic detail that matters. Most of them were women in their 20s. Young women, often early in their careers, in vulnerable positions where speaking out could genuinely damage their future prospects in the industry. That's not a small group of people with an axe to grind. That's a pattern. That's systemic. Now here's what's crucial to understand. Matt Kaplan was the central figure in these allegations, not Alex Cooper directly. The investigation focused on his behavior as a leader and business operator. But you can't separate the two when they're co-founders of the same company. Sources described a toxic work environment characterized by intimidation tactics and unprofessional conduct. Multiple employees reported that Kaplan made comments about their physical appearance that crossed professional boundaries. Others said he asked invasive personal questions that had nothing to do with their job performance. Some claimed he made veiled threats about their career prospects if they didn't comply with his demands or if they pushed back against his management style. The words that kept appearing in these testimonies were volatile, unprofessional, and disturbingly, flirtatious, or even screaming. That's not one person's interpretation. That's a consistent pattern described by multiple sources independently. What makes this even more damning is the timeline. These weren't isolated incidents from one bad week or one stressful project. According to the investigation, complaints and concerns about this behavior went on for an extended period. We're talking about a sustained pattern of conduct that multiple employees experienced and witnessed. And remember who these employees were. Young women, many of them fresh out of college or early in their media careers, working for a company that branded itself as empowering women. Imagine being a 23-year-old woman who got hired because you believed in the mission of creating a safe space for female voices, only to find yourself in an environment where you allegedly felt intimidated, objectified, or professionally threatened by one of the co-founders. That's not just a workplace complaint. That's a betrayal of everything the brand claimed to represent. There's another layer to this story that you need to know about. Before Vanity Fair even published their investigation, there were deleted posts and witnesses who went silent. That's an open loop we'll come back to, but it suggests that people were trying to speak out before this article dropped and something stopped them. Industry insiders have confirmed that whispers about Unwell Network's workplace culture existed long before this investigation went public. People in media circles knew something was off. They just didn't have the documentation or the courage to go on record. And here's where it gets legally interesting. Before publication, an attorney representing Unwell Network reportedly threatened Vanity Fair and accused the journalist of bias. That's a classic intimidation tactic designed to kill a story before it sees daylight. But Vanity Fair is a major publication with serious legal resources. They don't scare easily. The fact that they published anyway tells you they were confident in their sources and their reporting. So with all of this documented evidence, with 40 sources, with a major publication standing behind their reporting, how did Alex Cooper respond? She waited until she was on stage at Cannes Lions, one of the most prestigious advertising and media festivals in the world. The setting matters here. She's not doing a sit-down interview where she can be pressed on details. She's not releasing a carefully crafted statement through her PR team. She's at a glamorous international event, in front of a friendly audience, in a context where she controls the narrative. And what did she say? Quote, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." That was her primary response to a thoroughly reported investigation by one of the most respected magazines in journalism. She also talked about needing thick skin as a woman in media, suggesting that she's being held to a different standard because of her gender. She implied this was all part of a smear campaign, though she provided no evidence of who would be behind such a campaign or why. Here's what she didn't say, and this is crucial. She didn't address Matt Kaplan's alleged behavior. She didn't acknowledge the experiences of the 30-plus employees who spoke to Vanity Fair. She didn't explain what steps, if any, the company took when concerns were raised. She didn't commit to any investigation or accountability measures. Instead, she positioned herself as the victim of unfair media coverage and gender bias. But here's the problem with that deflection. The allegations aren't about her directly. They're about her business partner and the culture of the company she co-founded. By making it about attacks on her, she's shifting the narrative away from the actual issue, which is whether young women were mistreated in a workplace that claimed to empower them. Then there's the Alex Earl angle, which honestly looks like grasping at straws. Alex suggested there might be a connection between the journalist who wrote the Vanity Fair piece and Alex Earl, another influencer. The connection is incredibly weak and circumstantial, something about them both being involved in similar social circles or events. But even if there was a connection, so what? That doesn't invalidate 40 sources. That doesn't explain away the consistent pattern of allegations. But that doesn't address the substance of the reporting. It's classic deflection. When you can't attack the message, attack the messenger. When you can't disprove the facts, create a conspiracy theory about bias and hidden agendas. The public perception split immediately. Her loyal fans defended her, saying she was being unfairly targeted because she's a successful woman. Critics pointed out that she completely avoided addressing the actual substance of the allegations. Media analysts noted that her response was a masterclass in deflection and narrative control, but not in a good way. What's most revealing about her response is the misalignment. The allegations are about Matt Kaplan's behavior and the workplace culture at Unwell Network. Her response was about defending herself from what she perceives as unfair attacks and gender bias. Do you see the problem? She's answering a different question than the one being asked. Nobody is claiming Alex Cooper personally screamed at employees or made inappropriate comments. The question is, As a co-founder and the public face of a company that brands itself on empowerment, what did you know about this behavior? And what did you do about it? Her canned response doesn't address that at all. This matters because it sets the tone for how she handles accountability going forward. Is she going to investigate the claims? Is she going to implement new workplace policies? Is she going to separate from Matt Kaplan if the allegations are substantiated? Or is she going to continue treating this as a PR problem that can be spun away with the right messaging? The empowerment contradiction becomes impossible to ignore at this point. You've built an entire brand on the idea that you create safe spaces for women, that you amplify their voices, that you understand the challenges young women face in professional environments, and now you have 30-plus young women saying that your company allegedly did the opposite. That's not a minor inconsistency. That's a fundamental betrayal of your brand promise. And the response of dismissing it as internet rumors and smear campaigns only makes it worse. Because now you're not just accused of allowing a toxic workplace, you're actively dismissing the voices of the women who experienced it. That's the opposite of empowerment. That's silencing. The media coverage after her Cannes appearance reflected this disconnect. Some outlets framed it as Alex Cooper fighting back against unfair allegations. Others pointed out that she avoided addressing any of the substance. Trade publications noted that this could have serious implications for her business partnerships and future deals. So let's get to the core truth here. Can you preach empowerment while your employees say otherwise? That's the fundamental question Alex Cooper now has to answer. And her Cannes response suggests she's not ready to confront it honestly. There's a massive gap between the public brand message and what allegedly happened in the private workplace reality. Every week on Call Her Daddy, Alex talks about standing up for yourself, recognizing toxic behavior, not accepting mistreatment. But according to these allegations, young women in her own company were experiencing exactly that kind of mistreatment, and their concerns were allegedly ignored or dismissed. Matt Kaplan's role makes this even more complicated. He's not just an employee Alex can fire, he's a co-founder, a business partner, someone whose operations and decisions are deeply intertwined with hers. When does his behavior become her accountability? And the answer is, when you're business partners and when your brand is built on protecting women. The defense that doesn't address the defense is a classic PR mistake. Alex is defending herself against perceived gender bias and media attacks, but that's not what she's actually being accused of. Nobody is saying Alex Cooper shouldn't be a successful woman in media. The allegation is that the company she co-founded allegedly created a hostile work environment for other women. By reframing this as an attack on her success rather than addressing the workplace culture claims, she's engaging in textbook deflection. And the pattern continues with the conspiracy theories about smear campaigns and biased journalists. Instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, 30-plus employees have legitimate concerns, she's suggesting they're all part of some coordinated effort to take her down. That's not accountability, that's denial. What did the employees actually want from this? Based on the reporting, they wanted acknowledgement. They wanted someone to take their experiences seriously. They wanted changes to the workplace culture so future employees wouldn't go through what they allegedly went through. What did they get instead? They got told not to believe everything they read on the internet. They got conspiracy theories about biased journalists. They got a response that centered Alex's feelings about being criticized rather than their experiences of alleged mistreatment. That's not just disappointing, that's insulting. The legal intimidation angle before publication signals something important too. When your first response to allegations is to threaten the publication rather than investigate the claims, that tells you something about priorities. It suggests the focus is on controlling the narrative and protecting the brand rather than on whether the allegations have merit and whether changes need to be made. From an industry insider perspective, this looks bad. Other media companies are watching how Alex handles this because it sets a precedent. If you can build a brand on empowerment, face credible allegations of workplace toxicity, and just deflect without consequences, what message does that send? It tells other companies that you can say all the right things publicly while allegedly doing the opposite privately. And as long as your brand is strong enough and your lawyers are aggressive enough, you'll be fine. The thick-skin comment is particularly problematic because it implies the employees are too sensitive rather than the leadership being inappropriate. That's classic victim-blaming language. You're not being mistreated, you just need thicker skin. You're not experiencing a hostile workplace. You just can't handle the pressure of media. It shifts responsibility from the people in power to the people without power, which is exactly backwards. Let's talk about Vanity Fair's credibility for a moment, because Alex's response essentially asks people to dismiss their reporting. Vanity Fair is not a gossip blog. They're a major publication with a reputation to protect and legal teams that vet every claim. They spoke with 40 sources. They corroborated allegations across multiple independent testimonies. They gave Unwell Network's legal team the opportunity to respond before publication. This was thorough, professional journalism. To dismiss it as internet rumors is either willfully ignorant or deliberately misleading. And then there's the silence of other parties. Matt Kaplan himself hasn't issued a public statement. Other executives at Unwell Network haven't spoken out to defend the workplace culture. Current employees aren't rushing to social media to say the allegations are false. That silence is deafening. If this was truly a baseless smear campaign, you'd expect to see a coordinated defense with multiple voices vouching for the company culture. Instead, you get one deflective response from Alex and legal threats. That tells you something. Despite all this controversy, the business machine keeps running. New TV adaptations of Call Her Daddy content are still moving forward. Alex's executive producing deals remain active. The brand expansion hasn't slowed down publicly. Partnerships and sponsorships continue. From the outside, it looks like business as usual, which creates this bizarre disconnect. On one hand, you have serious allegations about workplace toxicity and a response that many people found inadequate. On the other hand, you have a media empire that continues to grow and profit as if nothing happened. What does this reveal about accountability in the media industry? It suggests that as long as the revenue keeps flowing and the audience stays engaged, workplace culture issues can be managed as PR problems rather than fundamental business problems. Employee voices versus corporate momentum. That's really what this comes down to. 30-plus young women shared their experiences with a major publication, and the response from the company was to threaten legal action and deflect publicly. Meanwhile, the business continues to expand, new deals get signed, and the brand grows stronger. The court of public opinion is split, with some people defending Alex and others calling for accountability. But what about actual consequences? Will this affect future partnerships? Will brands be hesitant to associate with Unwell Network knowing these allegations exist? Will potential employees think twice before accepting jobs there? Those are the long-term reputation questions that remain unanswered. We're still in the immediate aftermath phase where everyone is reacting and taking sides. The real test will be whether this has any lasting impact on the business or whether it becomes just another controversy that gets forgotten as soon as the next news cycle begins. So here's where we are. Alex Cooper built an empire on empowerment, on giving women a voice, on creating safe spaces for honest conversations. Vanity Fair published a thoroughly reported investigation featuring 40 sources, most of them young women who worked for her company, alleging that the workplace culture was toxic and hostile. Her business partner Matt Kaplan was the central figure in these allegations, and her response was to dismiss it as internet rumors, suggest it was a smear campaign, and deflect to gender bias rather than addressing the substance of the claims. The mismatch between the allegations and the response couldn't be more stark. Employees wanted acknowledgement and change. They got deflection and denial. The empowerment brand credibility is now in serious question. Can you claim to empower women while allegedly allowing or ignoring their mistreatment in your own company? That's the contradiction Alex Cooper hasn't resolved. Matt Kaplan's behavior becomes Alex's responsibility the moment they became business partners and the moment she built her brand on protecting women. You can't separate the two. If he's creating a hostile environment and you're the co-founder who preaches empowerment, your silence or inaction is complicity. That's not unfair. That's leadership accountability. What does this mean for female-led media companies going forward? It means that the standards for workplace culture need to match the public messaging. You can't just talk about empowerment in your content while allegedly practicing something different in your operations. The audience is too smart for that. The employees are too connected. The media is too thorough. Eventually, the contradiction gets exposed. Can the brand survive this? That's the open question. Alex Cooper has a massive, loyal audience. Call Her Daddy remains hugely popular. But brands are built on trust. And trust is fragile. Once people start questioning whether you practice what you preach, it's very hard to rebuild that credibility. What do you think? Can a brand built on empowerment survive allegations that it failed to empower its own employees? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want to stay updated on how this story develops, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This isn't over. More voices might come forward, more details might emerge, and we'll be here to break it all down. Thanks for watching Behind the Tea.